I'm Jim Longworth, and welcome to a special edition of Triad Today. Over the next half hour, I'll be speaking with two of our area congressmen, Ted Budd and Mark Walker, about a wide range of issues that affect all of us. But first, a word from Mark Schaefer, CEO of Triad Federal Credit Union, who's helping to bring you this special program.
Education is important at every age and on every level. That's why Triad Federal Credit Union works with schools and the community at large to provide financial literacy instruction. We offer financial education grants to help teachers incorporate personal finance into their curriculum. And we partner with local schools so teens and young adults can make better decisions about their finances and exercise their financial independence. It is also important for us as citizens to be aware of how government works and how public policy initiatives might impact our community. That's why we support Triad Today and its commitment to voter education. I'm Mark Schaefer, CEO of Triad Federal Credit Union, and we hope you enjoy this special presentation.
Thanks, Mark. And now let's get to the program and my special guest. On my immediate right, Ted Budd is a first-term congressman from the 13th Congressional District, and next to him, our good friend Mark Walker, who's been on the show many times, representing the 6th District. Welcome back, guys. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jim.
Let's start with guns, and let's start with hate, and let's see how it all meshes together. We got a lot of problems. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the number of hate groups in America is at a 20-year high. In their latest report, the center's president actually blames Donald Trump's hateful rhetoric on part of this. The New Zealand shooter even admitted that Mr. Trump inspired him to kill Muslims. Now, this is a terrible situation. Here's my question. Do words matter, and if so, should Congress draft a resolution denouncing the president's hateful rhetoric in these situations? Because I know you do special resolutions. Ted.
You know, when you look at what this tragedy that happened in New Zealand, that was 94 pages across the spectrum of the worst parts of the internet. So while it was extremely hateful, I wouldn't exactly assign it to any particular person. We have to condemn that act of violence, which has just left so many in pain. And then when you think about things back in the U.S., you know, that happened 13 months ago with Parkland, you have to condemn that. And then, you know, you had instances, 40 different instances of spewing things across the internet from Nicholas Cruz that weren't addressed. So
right.
You have to address them, especially when it comes to violence.
Mark, words matter?
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem calling out hate and standing up for injustice. Anytime it happens. This past Sunday, I was with my constituents at the Burlington Mosque, making sure they knew where our heart was. But I will also push back a little bit on the Southern Poverty Law Center. Though they did great work in the beginning and they should be commended, when you list people like Ben Carson or Family Research Council as a hate group that creates their own problems, I think they have to be more responsible in doing so.
All right, now, you know, we know about the resolution that you guys passed some time ago about Steve King, Representative Steve King, who made sort of a racist remark and said something dumb like, I love white supremacists, or some idiotic thing. Anyway, you guys stepped up and did a resolution and slapped him down on that, took his committee assignments away. But yet, Congressman Omar makes several anti-Semitic remarks. You're thinking there's going to be a resolution that's going to condemn her. It didn't turn out that way, and you and some other Republicans didn't sign it in its final form. Ted, why not?
Well, I think there were 23 or so of us that said no to that because we really want to deal with the actual issue. We dealt with it among ourselves. I think it was nearly unanimous that people that spoke against the words that addressed Steve King, but when it came to Omar, they came up missing. They didn't deal with the committees. They didn't deal with the actual hate speech, which she had repeated multiple times. And so we want the issue addressed, and they failed to address it in that.
There was no consequence then?
No, a resolution, Jim, as I know you're very informed, really has no teeth in it. So it was a little bit of a political stunt to start with. And the fact that just days earlier they had insinuated that they would call out Representative Omar. As vice chair of the conference, I'm on the steering committee. I was in the room when we made the decision unanimously to remove Steve King from his committees. We would expect the Democrats would offer the same decor.
Yeah, especially over something this sensitive. That didn't make any sense. Nearly every mass shooting over the past 20 years, and guys, I'm going to go back to Columbine in '99, has involved some kind of assault-style rifle and is involved at one time or another high-capacity ammo clips. Some people refer to them as magazines. Do you support a ban on those kind of rifles and clips, Ted?
Absolutely not. We have to deal with those who have terrorist intent and those who have criminal intent. You have to deal with the people and not the device. Look, we see tens of millions of those things owned by Second Amendment following law-abiding citizens without a danger to themselves or others. And we have to realize that we have a people problem, not a device problem.
Mark?
Yeah, I'm willing to take a second look at anything that comes across our desk. I don't want to be reacted to the place that we're not willing to look at it. I think Republicans stand strong for background checks. We actually, last session, we worked on the Fix NICS, a particular piece of legislation that deals with the National Criminal Database to make sure there was no loops or gaps. We're going to continue to be proactive. What we don't want to do, Jim, is when we're cutting some of this issue out, that we don't cut the law-abiding citizens so to the point that we're infringing on their Second Amendment.
I don't spend a lot more time on this, but Ted, very quickly, so people know, I mean, you and I have talked before. My wife and I have visited your gun shop, and it's very well, yeah, it's very well run. You guys are very strict about things, very law-abiding, but aren't you conflicted a little bit? Because why does anybody need an assault weapon that can kill 200 people in a minute?
Yeah, you have to ask, why do you need a car that goes over 65 miles per
No,
hour?
don't give me that. Don't give me that. Just, I mean, what really? I mean, why does anybody need an assault weapon?
Yeah, there's collectors. It's not really assault. It's a modern sporting rifle, is the new term. It's the musket of today. It's mechanically advanced, but it's really
But you
about
realize the musket, when they wrote the Second Amendment, could kill one person in a minute, not 500.
a little quicker than that. But to your point, we do have a people problem, not a device problem.
Mark, lawmakers in North Carolina want to pay teachers, give them a raise if they carry a gun in class, as long as they're certified. Does that make any sense to you?
I don't know that I struggle a little bit with the motivation behind that. I think there should be no restrictions if they want to. I don't know that it should be tied specifically to a monetary advancement, because there may be some teachers, law-abiding, proud of the Second Amendment, that may not feel comfortable in doing so. I believe they should all have the right to do so, but I don't know. I'd have to relook at that particular state legislation to see why the monetary benefit is
Yeah, and I know it's not something you guys are voting on, but Ted, what do you think?
You really want to make that decision as local as possible in conjunction with your local school boards and your local laws, and also your local law enforcement.
And in order to, the final thing I want to get to, we have enough time? All right, let me wrap up with this very quickly. Yes or no, do you think we should have a school resource officer in every school?
As many as possible, absolutely.
Mark?
Without doubt.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about immigration. Let's take a quick break. Edition of Triad Today, brought to you in part by the good folks at Triad Federal Credit Union, and we're with our friends and representatives, literally mean that. Next to me, Ted Budd, representative in Congress from the 13th District, and our friend Mark Walker from the 6th District. Guys, let's pick up on immigration for a second. Over 75,000 illegal immigrants crossed over our southern border in February alone. That number is expected to grow to over 1 million by year's end. The two of you know that me as a liberal independent, I am no fan of the president, but he's right. There's a crisis at the border. Now, how are we going to deal with this, Ted?
Look, this has been a problem that has been very bipartisan. Go back to 2006, 2011, 2013. $50 billion have been appropriated. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer were behind this. The Secure Fences Act, bipartisan support. And now all of a sudden that Trump's in office, they're absolutely against him. So it's become hyper-politicized. And we need to realize this is a national security issue. I think the president's addressing it, and unfortunately, they're not against border security, or if they are, they're really just against Trump.
Mark?
This Congress, I've been asked to serve as the ranking member on terrorism and intelligence under a committee on Homeland Security. I've looked at these numbers. There's been a 572% increase just since the last administration. People ask sometimes, why is this an emergency now? Well, because we're seeing more mass influx. We're seeing migrant children being abused. Even Doctors Without Borders number will tell you that 1 out of 3 of these young girls, migrants, are being assaulted. 1 out of the 6 young men. If that's not a humanitarian crisis, take the whole politics out of it. That's an issue that if we have a chance to deal with and we can resolve it, we have proved that secure fences, structures, whatever you want to call it, work. Why has this become such an issue? It's because the president has asked for this.
Yeah, and again, going back to the words matter thing, if he would just stay off of Twitter, you know, it might make a difference, don't you think? I mean, seriously, if he would just not, you know, put his foot in his mouth so often, maybe we could get together. I don't know, though, or maybe Ted's right. Maybe they'd be against him no matter what, but we've got a crisis there. Some sheriff's departments around the country are refusing to be the de facto agents of ICE. They say they won't take part in rounding up illegal immigrants for one reason or another. Are you guys okay with that position that some of the sheriffs are taking, Ted?
So I've talked with chiefs of police, I've talked with sheriffs, the chief law enforcement officers for their particular areas, and they realize, the ones that are with the president on this, how much of a problem it costs when their neighbors, neighboring chief law enforcement officers, refuse to work with ICE. They need to work in conjunction, local to federal, so that they don't create pockets of incentives to gather around them. So it's really caused a problem when law enforcement refuses to work with ICE.
Mark?
3 weeks ago, I met with 100 sheriffs on the steps of the Capitol who were concerned about this. Just last week, Sheriff Sam Page from Rockingham County sent me a letter with 60 sheriffs that our staff distributed to every single senator talking about this is a crisis. You do have some outliers who are not wanting to follow the law. That should be concerning to all of us.
The 2020 census is coming up fairly soon, and then people say, well, why are you talking about that now? We're talking about immigration. Here's my question. One judge has already ruled, and I think erroneously, that it's illegal to ask citizenship status when taking the 2020 census. This doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I know there are opponents of this, but guys, help me understand this. And do you think it will be overturned? What are your thoughts on, I mean, it seems simple just to declare a citizenship for a census. Ted?
The history of the census has been to have that question, and now it's new that they would not have that question. So it's a new precedent. I think it's very unfortunate. We need to make sure that question is still on there.
Is it going to stand, though? I mean, is it going to be overturned, or what do you think is going to happen?
That's in the courts, and let's sure hope so.
Mark?
Yeah, I think this has to do even with the districts that Ted and I have the chance to serve, because how you serve is directly tied to the population of your district. If you do not have an accurate depiction of how many residents it messes up the whole process. The only thing that I can understand is maybe some of the Democrats that we have heard would dare mention that illegals should actually be voting in our elections. That's a problem, and I think that we're seeing them show their hand at this time.
Yeah, that's a touchy thing. I want to go to a quick break again. When we come back, let's talk about, Mark spoke about elections. Let's talk about elections, and let's talk about security of elections and otherwise when we come back. We'll be right back. Back now on this special edition of Triad Today. I sort of call it a voter education edition because I think we're talking about lots of issues that are important to everybody, and you need to be up on them, especially when it comes time to vote, but year-round as well. I want to start back, of course, our special guest, Ted Budd, Congressman from the 13th District, Mark Walker from the 6th District. I want to start with Mark first on this. You introduced something called the Information Sharing Act, and as I understand it, it's supposed to help cities combat terrorism. Am I right or wrong about that? What's it about?
You are correct. It is to prevent, at the local level, an opportunity to seek out any kind of terroristic behavior. I believe we've added $400 million to help make sure not only that our voter elections are pure and proper, but also to push back any kind of tainted things that we might see infiltrating that particular voting process. I think it was a good bill, and I think that's one we've got a lot of reaction from it.
Ted, not really switching gears because we're still in a security mode here. I want to ask a security question. You introduced something called the Cybersecurity Improvement Act. What is that all about, and why did you bring it forward?
Sure. The full name is actually the Internet of Things, or the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act. And what it does is anything that is owned by the federal government that is a cybersecurity or Internet of Things connected type of device, which are proliferating now, we have to make sure that they're maintained at the highest standards. This can really work to help us with voter security. These machines that are becoming more and more connected, these voting devices, we have to make sure that they are maintained at the absolute highest level of cybersecurity. This provides funds for that, and it requires that they actually are maintained at a high standard.
Now, Mark, I'm assuming you support what Ted's doing with that, right?
Yes, most of the time you'll find I'm supporting what Ted's doing and vice versa.
And for Mark.
Have you ever disagreed on anything?
There may be one or two votes, but it has
on
to go
coming
back
here. You disagreed on whether you should come here
Do you
today.
think we'd actually share it with you?
No, I wouldn't. Now, let's get back to this for a second. Now, Ted covered the whole thing here about elections, but Mark, I'm just curious, your thoughts on, are we doing everything we can right now to make sure we don't get hacked elections?
I think so. It is unfortunate whether you're the RNC or the DNC that anything is shared that could be detrimental to you, and I think we've seen it. But listen, this wasn't a first go-round. The Russians as well as the Chinese, we have 15 to 20,000, speaking as a member of the Committee on Homeland Security, we have 15 to 20,000 attempts per day by some private sponsored, some state-sponsored, to be able to infringe on our quality of life every single day, and elections are no different. We've got to do more that we can, or we've got to do as much as we can to make sure we're pushing back.
Let me ask about this. There's again, this is sort of a state issue in a way, but it could be a federal. There are some state legislators that say, hey, we want more people to vote and we want to have more access to voting. So let's make Election Day a state holiday, a federal holiday. Let's make it easier. Ted, you for something like that?
I think people have had plenty of time to vote. We've got such a large window right now with early voting. I don't think there needs to be a special holiday. I say let's go vote and let's go to work.
Mark?
Yeah, I think we've got some great holidays, President's Day, Martin Luther King Jr., Christmas. We've got enough federal holidays right now.
Christmas,
I don't think we need to give government employees another day off.
I can't go vote on Thanksgiving though, Mark.
Well, the thing is, a lot of the people, everyday members, they'd still have to show up to work. It's the federal government employees a lot of times that would have that off day.
Yeah, President Trump says that North Korea is no longer a threat to our national security. I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but I think he did say those exact words. Do you agree with that, Ted?
I think we need to continue to be in a dialogue with them, and I think that's what he's done. And he has brought them to the table, and he's also shown that when we don't have a good deal, he's not afraid to walk away. But we have to stay engaged.
Mark?
Yeah, I've been to South Korea twice, even cross over a little bit there at the DMZ into North Korea. These guys are still a threat. We were surprised a couple years ago just how advanced they were in some of their nuclear capability. We've got to keep an eye on that, but I applaud President Trump for doing everything he can to resolve some of these crises.
Look, I wasn't planning to ask this, but since the two of you, we were joking a minute ago about do you disagree about anything, but basically the two of you pretty much agree with Trump's agenda. So I'm going to ask a real snotty, sarcastic question, but it's a serious one. Were you elected to represent the people of the district, or were you elected to represent Donald Trump and protect him? Ted?
My oath is to the Constitution and for what that represents for the people of the 13th District of North Carolina. So that's my oath, and that's who I was sworn to support and represent, and that's what I intend to do.
All right, but there are a lot of people that don't agree with what he's doing that you represent, so how do you square that?
There's a lot of people that may not agree with the president in style, but they love his substance and they love what he's accomplished for our country.
Mark, who do you represent?
I represent the people who sent me there to uphold, certainly take that oath to protect them under the Constitution. And listen, there are times where we've got to separate the personality versus the policy. I would like for my children to emulate the former president when it comes to being the right husband and the right father. But the facts are this: 11 million people were added to the poverty rolls under the Obama administration. In the last 2 years, 4.5 million people have come out of that poverty. We may not like the abrasiveness of the personality. And listen, one of the things I'm most proud of the last 4 years is the racial relationships and the success, the hope that we build into all communities. I'm proud of that, but we're also going to stand for what we believe is right.
All right, on that note, I want to take a quick break and come back and talk about health care. We'll be right back. Now, in this special edition of Triad Today with our special guest, on my right, Ted Budd, representative from the 13th District, and next to him, Mark Walker, representative from the 6th District. We appreciate them taking time to do this. For the record, we are taping this on Wednesday, March the 20th, because this is the break they have from Congress. This will air the following week. So if you think, well, are they back in town? They're not. They're in town right now. But I do appreciate you guys making the effort to get over here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about health care for a second. Critics of Medicare for All say it's socialism, which I don't think it is. They say it's too expensive. It could cost $32 trillion over the next 10 years. But here's the thing, guys. If we didn't do anything different from what we're doing now, the estimates are that it'd cost $50 trillion over the same period of time. I'm not getting this whole idea about how evil Medicare for All is. Ted?
So when you do look at the cost, we have a $22 trillion debt now, and you say you would add $33 trillion to that, and we only have a $21 trillion GDP. We can't sustain that. And you also have to reach out to 100 million people in this country and say, you know, that work-related or that insurance that you're getting through your employer, well, we're going to take that away and give you a government program instead. So you've got 100 million people to deal with that really like what they have right now. And you'd be taking that away. You'd lower the quality of it. I was with veterans this morning that are having challenges with the VA. So essentially you would say, let's have VA for all, or let's have the Indian healthcare system for all, which runs out of money about 9 or 10 months into its annual budget. Yeah, but so don't get sick in the last quarter.
Yeah, well, look, you can't project somebody else's failings. People used to say, oh, they got problems in Canada. Yeah, it's a huge landmass and they can't get to the hospital. But that's not the case here. We've got plenty of access. Mark, I'm wondering about this. I'm now on Medicare. When you and I first met, I wasn't.
Sure.
And now I've got more gray hairs because I met you. I think it's part of the reason. But it seems to be a good system. I don't know why people who are 40 and 50 and 30 shouldn't have it. Thoughts?
Well, I love your heart for where you're coming from, because I believe it is out of compassion for people who do suffer, and I hope that's all of our position, at least a foundational point. But here's my thing on it, Jim. How can you trust the government when they tell you that this is going to work? The last time we did Obamacare, you could keep your doctor, you could keep your insurance. None of that turned out to be true. $2,500 would be your maximum premium. That all was fabricated. Whether it was intentional or not, it didn't work out that way. So here we come along again, and we're going to even add to that particular program. It gives me great pause. The other part of it is this is the individual market. To take away the private insurance from employers that is established now, I believe Kamala Harris even suggested doing so, that should frighten us all. As chairman of the Republican Study Committee this past term, we were able to pass a health care bill that even included pre-existing conditions. We struggled to get that through the Senate. There are ways to look at this and resolve this, but I don't think Medicare for All is the answer.
Yeah, but under the current system, Chad, nobody ever makes any attempt to cap the premiums. And that used to be the thing I would yell at Mark about. I'd call him up, and now he won't take my calls, but no, I used to.
I'll take your calls, Jim.
Yeah, that's right. I used to call him up and say, Mark, they're not capping premiums. They're not, and this is on the Democrat proposal. This is Obama. This is Trump. Nobody is bothering to cap premiums. That's the big deal, because you got people paying $1,000, $1,500 a month for premiums and decide if they can afford medicines or dog food or food for themselves. You know there's a problem.
Ultimately, it's a lack of transparency. If you go to these great providers, we've got some of the best providers in the world, and you go to these doctors and you say, how much is this procedure? They really have no idea. They're very disconnected from
That's
what
true.
it actually costs.
That's true.
And so there's lack of competition, lack of transparency, and lack of price awareness. If we brought those three things to bear, we would drastically improve the quality, improve the coverage for many, and reduce the price.
Yeah, Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the president's trying to look at this from the pharmaceutical aspect as well. That disclosure, talking about what do these medications actually cost, I believe that's another area where we can reduce some of the prices.
And of course, thanks to Congress, the hospitals now have to disclose some of those things, if you can find it and work your way through the internet. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, come back for some final thoughts. Now, in this special edition of Triad Today with our special guest, on my right, Ted Budd, representative from the 13th District, and next to him, Mark Walker, representative from the 6th District. We appreciate them taking time to do this. For the record, we are taping this on Wednesday, March the 20th, because this is the break they have from Congress. This will air the following week. So if you think, well, are they back in town? They're not. They're in town right now. But I do appreciate you guys making the effort to get over
Privilege.
here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about health care for a second. Critics of Medicare for All say it's socialism, which I don't think it is. They say it's too expensive. It could cost $32 trillion over the next 10 years. But here's the thing, guys. If we didn't do anything different from what we're doing now, the estimates are that it'd cost $50 trillion over the same period of time. I'm not getting this whole idea about how evil Medicare for All is. Ted?
So when you do look at the cost, we have a $22 trillion debt now, and you say you would add $33 trillion to that, and we only have a $21 trillion GDP. We can't sustain that. And you also have to reach out to 100 million people in this country and say, you know, that work related, or that insurance that you're getting through your employer, well, we're going to take that away and give you a government program instead. So you've got 100 million people to deal with that really like what they have right now. And you'd be taking that away, you'd lower the quality of it. I was with veterans this morning that are having challenges with the VA. So essentially you would say, let's have VA for all, or let's have the Indian healthcare system for all, which runs out of money about 9 or 10 months into its annual budget.
Yeah, but
so don't get sick in the last quarter.
Yeah, well, look, you can't project somebody else's failings. People used to say, oh, they got problems in Canada. Yeah, it's a huge landmass and they can't get to the hospital. But that's not the case here. We've got plenty of access. Mark, I'm wondering about this. I'm now on Medicare. When you and I first met, I wasn't.
Sure.
And now I've got more gray hairs because I met you. I think it's part of the reason. But it seems to be a good system. I don't know why people who are 40 and 50 and 30 shouldn't have it. Thoughts?
Well, I love your heart for where you're coming from, because I believe it is out of compassion for people who do suffer, and I hope that's all of our position, at least a foundational point. But here's my thing on it, Jim. How can you trust the government when they tell you that this is going to work? The last time we did Obamacare, you could keep your doctor, you could keep your insurance. None of that turned out to be true. $2,500 would be your maximum premium. That all was fabricated, whether it was intentional or not. It didn't work out that way. So here we come along again, and we're going to even add to that particular program. It gives me great pause. The other part of it is this is the individual market. To take away the private insurance from employers that is established now, I believe Kamala Harris even suggested doing so, that should frighten us all. As chairman of the Republican Study Committee this past term, we were able to pass a health care bill that even included pre-existing conditions. We struggled to get that through the Senate. There are ways to look at this and resolve this, but I don't think Medicare for All is the answer.
Yeah, but under the current system, Chad, nobody ever makes any attempt to cap the premiums. And that used to be the thing I would yell at Mark about. I'd call him up, and now he won't take my calls, but no,
I'll take your calls, Jim.
Yeah, that's right. I used to call him up and say, Mark, they're not capping premiums. They're not, and this is on the Democrat proposal. This is Obama. This is Trump. Nobody is bothering to cap premiums. That's the big deal, because you got people paying $1,000, $1,500 a month for premiums and decide if they can afford medicines or dog food or food for themselves. You know there's a problem.
Ultimately, it's a lack of transparency. If you go to these great providers, we've got some of the best providers in the world, and you go to these doctors and you say, how much is this procedure? They really have no idea. They're very disconnected from what it actually costs.
That's true.
And so there's lack of competition, lack of transparency, and lack of price awareness. If we brought those three things to bear, we would drastically improve the quality, improve the coverage for many, and reduce the price.
Yeah, Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the President's trying to look at this from the pharmaceutical aspect as well. That disclosure talking about what do these medications actually cost, I believe that's another area where we can reduce some of the prices.
And of course, thanks to Congress, the hospitals now have to disclose some of those things, if you can find it and work your way through the internet. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, come back for some final thoughts.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
Love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
ACC sports fans, you found your home. The Sports Hub at AM 600, AM 920, and the Sports Hub app.
Back now on the special voter education edition of Triad Today, we just have a couple minutes left with Mark Walker from the 6th District, Ted Budd next to me from the 13th District. Guys, I want to give this time to you to talk about any bills that you might have coming up or that you've introduced that we haven't touched on, Ted.
Yeah, something I'm working on is the CAMRA, or C-A-M-R-A, Children in Media Research Advancement Act. So what we have is a proliferation of devices, and we're not sure the long-term effects on our kids, on our adolescents, on our teenagers. We know it's changing us, but we don't know exactly how, and we want to protect our kids from harms that we're not aware of. So this uses NIH to study this so that we can protect our kids from those harms.
NIH, I think, has historically been a fine organization. I'm glad you're tying that into them. Mark, you have something going on, speaking of young people,
Sure.
a little bit older young people, but what are you doing?
Well, we have 2 or 3 bills we're working on right now. One of them is the LIFT Act that doesn't penalize churches and nonprofits. The new tax code, we're removing some of that. The thing that we're really focused on, we just dropped the bill last Thursday, was what we're basically allowing the student athletes to be able to have access to their image and likeness. For years, the NCAA requires a student athlete to literally sign a moratorium giving up their image and likeness. Now, you don't have to do that if you're any other student. Music scholarship, education, business, it doesn't matter what you are.
Because if I'm a tuba major or a clarinet major, I can go out on the weekends.
Play in the orchestra, play in a praise band, whatever you might want to do, you can do that. But to be able, and here's the thing, and no offense to the tuba player, but we're in the middle of March Madness, or getting ready for it. We're looking at $950 million to $1 billion that's raised on the backs of these. To us, this is a free market position, to be able to go out and use your own image or likeness. So we're not telling the NCAA how to do business, being a nonprofit. What we are telling them is that you have to remove the ban. Now, that requires changing the IRS tax code through the Ways and Means Committee as far as the amateur status. But we believe this is an injustice. I'm a big believer in that. 3 weeks ago, I was able to walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with John Lewis. I'll speak against for injustice done against the babies that we're not being able to see the day of light.
Right, right.
Now, we're going to continue to push forward on this. We believe this is past overdue, and we're looking forward to getting it done.
Ted, first termer in Congress, and I know you hope there'll be more terms. How has your life changed since you've been in Congress?
Well, I'm in Washington a whole lot more than I ever was. So, and I'm not there as a tourist. I'm there, to serve the people of the 13th District.
Right.
Yeah. So
well, I'm down at your gun shop while you're up in Washington.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And look, we're appreciative of that. But at the same time, we do good work for those in the 5 counties that I get to serve.
Is it stressful?
I wouldn't say it's stressful, but there's moments of pure joy and there's moments of challenge, but we just keep showing up and doing the hard work.
Very quickly, a few seconds, Mark, how things changed for you in terms of, maybe not personally, but you're no longer in the majority in the House.
Yeah, that's a little different place, but you know what? Jim, it's a privilege and an honor to serve the people of North Carolina, and we're going to continue. We're still learning. We're still growing. I'm happy to have that opportunity. We hope to do the very best job we can.
Guys, thanks for taking time to do this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, well, that's it for this special edition of Triad Today. But if you want to learn more about what's going on in Washington, I really urge you to go to these two websites, bud.house.gov and walker.house.gov. And also another thanks to Truliant Federal Credit Union for making this possible. Truliant, fcu.org is their website. So for all of us here, including to Mark Schaefer and his gang at Truliant Federal Credit Union, for Mark Walker, for Ted Budd, thanks for being with us and watching this program. I know we're not going out to vote anytime soon, but we call it voter education because we want to keep you up on the issues, and that's what these two gentlemen have done today, and we appreciate it. We'll see you next week.